Welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast, where it's all about fixing your marriage without your husband's conscious effort so that you feel desired, taken care of, and special, even if your marriage feels completely hopeless. I'm Laura Doyle, and today I'm talking about the 3 things you can't forgive in a relationship. My guest, Sam, was burned out in her marriage and her life. She was doing everything she could for her husband, but she really just wanted to run away. Her daughter even told her to just leave. Instead, she started 2 new habits that turned out to be life-changing. And today, her marriage is peaceful, joyful, intimate, and vulnerable. Her husband sends long stem roses to her at work. She's going to tell us how she did it so you can do it too. The Worst Relationship Advice of the Week award goes to an article about how to get your husband's attention without begging for it. And it's an effective way to make yourself seem desperate and insecure. All that's coming up, but first let's talk about the 3 things you can't forgive in a relationship. Everybody knows there are some things you just can't forgive in marriage. You're probably already thinking of them, right? Even before I say them, like abuse, physical, emotional, verbal abuse. It's terrible. 2 is being cheated on, whether he's got prostitutes or another woman. It makes you feel like a doormat and a fool. It's awful. And 3 is being with an addict who abuses drugs or alcohol. That's so unpredictable. You never know what might happen, which is just a painful way to live. So logically speaking, you can't just forgive and carry on with the status quo in those situations. Everybody knows you should just leave. That's a common refrain you've probably heard again and again. So the only rational option is to plot your escape from the abuser, the adulterer, or the addict that you're married to, which means you're left with the tragic burden of tearing your family apart. It's a scary, awful, no-win position to be in. So you can either choose endless suffering in your marriage, option A, or you can tear apart your family and give up on your dreams of a lasting, happy marriage, option B. And those are the only options. At least I used to think so and say so, regrettably. But are they really? As H.L. Mencken says, for every complex problem, there's an answer that's clear, simple, and wrong. What if there's another option? What if there's a third way? A way that's not just sucking it up while you are continuously humiliated or hurt. And it's not just denial, forgetting about the past or pretending it didn't happen and just hoping it gets better. That never works. No, the third way is not focusing on changing your husband, but changing your focus to yourself. It's not about helping your husband more, but helping yourself more. It's not about whether you can forgive him, but rather finding a way to be accountable for yourself. I'm talking about changing things in your control, like your outlook, your words, and the way you respond. I'm talking about surrendering control of things you can't control anyway and focusing on your own happiness instead. But Laura, you might protest, you don't know what it's like to live with my husband. How is surrendering ever going to help with such big, scary, stubborn problems in my marriage? Well, as far as I know, changing myself, that's the only thing that has ever helped with the big, stubborn, scary problems in my marriage. Nothing else ever worked. Nothing else made me feel safe. Nothing else made me feel loved like I do now. The rest was all just a stressful, exhausting waste of energy. And I'm not the only one. Melissa was 100% certain that her husband was an alcoholic, and she told him so. She asked him to cut back on his drinking. She called him a drunk and said it was hurting their kids. He just drank more. She was spending a lot of time thinking about option B, divorce, because she couldn't see herself continuing to suffer and letting her 2 boys suffer. But then she chose the third way. She stopped focusing on the things she hated about her husband. She started trusting him and thanking him for what he was doing right. And guess what, listeners? What she focused on increased. He stopped drinking entirely and started counting the days of his sobriety. You can hear him share about being sober for 18 months and giving his wife the credit for that in podcast episode number 107. And isn't that the outcome every wife really wants? Isn't that just way better than sucking it up or breaking up? You could even say that Melissa and her children were safer than they would have been if she had divorced. Isn't that something? But you might be saying, well, her situation is different than mine. That's how Rachel felt too. She also felt very oppressed, so verbally and emotionally abused that she had a getaway fund. She had a secret stash of money she was planning to use to leave her husband. But instead of escaping, she invested the money in relationship coach training. And today she is feeling happy and emotionally safe in that marriage to the very same man. She chose the third way. There are many, many stories of women in unforgivable situations who found this third way was also the best way to make themselves safe. Your situation may feel very different. It may be different. Only you know for sure what's right for you. But then again, you wouldn't be listening to this podcast if some part of you didn't have hope that you could also find a third way. I have hope for you too. After all, everything up to now has led you to this point. Was that just an accident? Are you just the victim of tragedy? Or is there much more to the story, which isn't over yet? Are you about to become empowered to write your own story? In the Ridiculously Happy Wife program, we have a very powerful and very popular training on how to write the end of your story while you're still in the middle. And if you're wondering if you should forgive your husband, I invite you to think instead about how you want your marriage story to be. What if you could wave a magic wand? As author Henry David Thoreau said, if you have built your castles in the air, your work need not be lost. That is where they should be. Now, put the foundations under them. When you're ready to get support with your marriage, let us help you build your foundation. If you'd like to be my guest on the Empowered Wife podcast and share about how you fixed a struggling relationship using the 6 intimacy skills, I would love to interview you. Just go to lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest to let me know that you are willing to make a big contribution to ending world divorce by telling your relationship story. I look forward to meeting you. That's lauradoyle.org/podcast-guest. My guest Sam was burned out in her marriage and in her life. She was doing everything she could for her husband, but she really just wanted to run away. Her daughter even told her, just leave. Instead, she started 2 new habits that turned out to be life-changing. And today, her marriage is peaceful, joyful, intimate, and vulnerable. Her husband sends long-stem roses to her at work. She's going to tell us how she did it so you can do it too. Sam, welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast. I'm excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Laura. I'm absolutely delighted to be here with you.
Well, great. Well, I would love to hear what things were like in the bad old days in your marriage.
Oh, yes. Okay. The bad old days. Going back to this space was challenging. You almost forget what it was like. And then I would just find myself crying. I'm like, I've come so far. But we got married after college and after a major brain surgery that I never fully healed from. So it was like I was starting out just in this burnout and not being healed. And we would just argue. I mean, we had fun together, but we would just argue over everything. Like if it could be something that would cause tension, if it was the dog, if it was going to another football game on a weekend or whatever, it was a point of tension for us. And so while it was beautiful and we were like, it was beautiful because we were married to each other. We loved each other. Like our whole courtship was just this amazing love story, in sickness and in health and all of the above. But then, oh goodness. Yeah. He started staying home, or not staying home, but he started staying after work longer to just like unload. He didn't want to come home. Eventually he shared with me that he didn't feel appreciated. This was one night, probably a State of the Union now that I look back on it. He was sharing that he didn't feel appreciated. And I'm sitting there like, I don't feel cherished. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. How can you not feel appreciated when I'm doing all this stuff? I'm working, I'm taking care of the dog, I'm taking care of the kids, I'm giving you babies, I'm cooking you meals.
What more could you want?
What more? Yes. And so, but that stuck out. I don't feel appreciated. So I was like, well, I don't know how to fix this. I can't make you feel appreciated. And I feel like I got stuck in that space. And so I was like digging in harder to doing even more, especially, he went back to school, decided to do a career change so he could be happy, which I was 100% on board with, because the burnout in his old role was so bad. And so he's going to school and he's still working. I mean, this man is literally killing himself for our family. And I couldn't recognize it because I was so burnt out on trying to do everything and make sure, like, oh, do you have your shaving cream? Are you wearing clothes? Let's do laundry. Let's take care of kids. Like, let's take care of the dog. Let's organize childcare. Oh yeah, I also work in a high stress environment at work, and I'm still not healed from my surgery all these years later. So, finally to cope, I didn't know how to cope. I was never taught how to cope.
Right.
And I opted to just like literally running away. I would grab my keys, grab my purse, get in my car, and I would go to our church and I would just cry, or I would drive to the coast because we live within driving distance to the beach. And I would find a lookout. There's something about salt water. Let me tell you, it's healing, but it's not the right type of healing. And I would just cry at the beach, and then I would come home and no one would talk to me in the family.
You just got the silent treatment?
Yeah. And then we would just like go to bed. We still slept in this, like, we live in a little bungalow in a small town. And so it's like, you can't go sleep in another room because there's only so many options. But we would sleep and we wouldn't talk to each other. We'd get up in the morning in silence and go to work. I would take care of kids. Told myself I wouldn't cry. And I didn't know what to do. I ended up, I guess my breaking point in all of this was Valentine's weekend of this year. So this year, February, my husband has always, like, he has a standing arrangement with a florist on Valentine's Day to have flowers delivered to me either at home or at work, depending on where Valentine's falls. And the flowers this year were delivered to the house because of where Valentine's Day fell. And I open the door and there's this beautiful arrangement and he's right there behind me and he goes, "Oh, I forgot to cancel that flower arrangement delivery based on how you've been." I was like, ouch.
Wow. Ouch.
Like, now I sit here, I'm like, ouch. And I also sit here, I'm like, holy heart message. He would ask if I was happy. I couldn't tell him yes. Like, it's just, it goes on and on and on. So I went to a little Facebook group, just asking for prayers. Like I'm at my breaking point with life. I was self-harming again. It was just like on and on and on. And I asked for prayers. And one of my girlfriends, who actually is in your program, slid into my DMs, as she does, and dropped podcasts and books for this woman named Laura Doyle and the Empowered Wife. And I'm like, no, that is not what I need.
No.
I continued to be disconnected while I continued to just, now what I recognize, be over controlling on everything in everyone's life. And another month passes, and I remember the message. I'm like sitting at work at my desk, and I'm like, I can't do this. I need to figure out either how to leave or like, but I didn't want to leave my kids. I didn't want to leave my husband because he was good. Like I wanted to leave because I couldn't handle it. It was not my marriage. Like looking at it, I'm like, I wasn't upset with my marriage. I was upset with me and my inability to handle any of it. I was like, oh, it can be better if I just like leave it, right? That's what everyone says. And I remember the message, and I have to like scroll up to find it. And I listened to the podcast that she sent me. And Laura, I kid you not, I'm pretty sure all of my coworkers thought I was losing my mind because I sat at my desk bawling, listening to these. And then, so I listened to one interview, and I'm like, you know what, let's just go back, like scroll up to the very first interview. I'm starting from the top, and I'm just listening to this straight, just absorbing. And then that on the way home. So that was probably like my breaking point. Nothing really triggered it except for me just being exhausted and burnt out and getting inbounds. And, you know, I was getting comments from family members and stuff. I'm like, I need help. I need to take care of myself. I'm not healing stuff. I'm struggling. And everyone was like, well, you just need to stop complaining. And I'm like, I'm asking for help. And so like whatever triggered that day, you fell into my podcast queue. You were the only thing in my podcast queue for I don't know how long. And I decided on the way home, I was like, all right, I have literally nothing to lose, because the next thing I'm looking at is just like calling it quits on an almost decade relationship for a man who has done nothing but literally kill himself for our family. And I can like try this and see where it goes. What do I have to lose?
Right. Nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose.
So you said some things I want to dig into a little bit.
Yeah.
Here. So, and one thing you had mentioned to me previously too is that you were also struggling at work at this time. So that plays into your story, right? So okay.
So work, a lot of burnout was happening. Obviously, I feel like, you know, it's 2022. We've all dealt with COVID at this point. And my employer was no different. And based on the area of work that I'm in and the area of work that my husband's in, both of us were heavily involved in the management of everything going on therein. And it was just like a lot of burnout, a lot of stop and pivot. And when everything in one part of your life is kind of chaos, it starts leaking over into other parts. And like when my work was chaos and my home life was chaos, and I'm not handling my home chaos, I was not handling my work chaos either. And I was struggling with meeting deliverables. I was, just like telling, It's so bad. I'm in a meeting with chief officers and I'm like, no, that's not how we're doing it. And my boss was like, you can't tell a chief officer that. And I'm like, well, I did. So it was just like, I don't care. Like the same as in my personal life where I'm like, I have nothing to lose. This, I was like, whatever. If I lose my job, I lose my job.
Yeah.
So
There was a part of you that just kind of wanted to blow up your life because there was so much pain, it sounds like.
Yeah.
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 And then you mentioned self-harm.
Yeah.
I don't think you're the only one, right, with that. So can you say
No.
more about that?
Yeah. So I had emergency brain surgery back in 2014. And I would I would do things like, obviously, like it wasn't, you can't see anything. You couldn't see any of the harm, but I was injuring my head and trying to injure my brain because it just was like, maybe this is an easy way to go. I've already almost gone out this way. Maybe I could just call it quits this way again. Oh, sorry. Let me grab a tissue.
Yeah. No, that's it
And
really says a lot about the pain you were in.
That's part of the reason why I was like, yeah, I'll do this interview, because I know I'm not alone in that space. And I want other women to know, like, no, there's things that can change. Like, you don't have to stay there. And I had done all the pharmaceuticals, I had done EMDR therapy. I mean, like, you list it, you name it, I tried it. And so, yeah, it has been a hot minute. It's been a hot minute since I've even been inclined to do any of that. It's just like, I don't need to do it. I don't need my kids to see it. And I actually put one of my affirmations from one of your workshops, because there's a spot in our house where it actually left a mark, which is painful. It's a visual reminder of where I was that we see every day. And I put my affirmation from you on it. So now, every time I see it, I'm reminded of this journey and where I'm going and who I am now.
Wow, beautiful. I love that.
And my husband saw that and he was like, oh, that's a really good thing to like remember and have in front of your face.
Wow. And what does your affirmation say?
I am worthy of love and forgiveness.
Beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
What a journey.
Yeah.
Well, I love that. So what else did you, so you got, I kind of interrupted you. So
yeah.
you talking about, you listened to the podcast and then it sounds like you started doing some things differently at your house.
So on the drive home, I was that day that I cried at my desk and probably freaked out my poor coworker who sits right across from me. This is my formal apology to you. I was like, okay, in the podcast, I heard them talking about doing smile campaigns. So I'm going to biohack my way into this because I'm going to at least trick my body that I'm happy. So I start an instant smile campaign. So the entire way home, I'm like driving and I've got this stupid smile on my face where
love it.
I'm just like, I'm forcing it at this point. But I was determined. I was determined. And then I did focus exercises because the other theme I heard you talking about was what you focus on increases. And it got me thinking, like, well, when I was trying to buy a car, like all of a sudden there were minivans everywhere. Like everyone on the planet owned a minivan. I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do that on the way home. So I started focusing on like, let's pick a color or a car type and let's just start pointing them out and counting it out the entire way home. So now I'm grinning like the entire way home, counting out whatever it is that I'm counting. I'm like, oh, look, there's another one, and being all peppy about it, even though I was annoyed with myself, partially annoyed with myself for trying. And I was like, okay, the two things I did was self-care.
Okay.
Like, I can do that. I need to do that. I had a practitioner tell me I needed to do that. Like, and I was like, okay, I'll do it. And then I hear it from you and I'm like, okay, I really need to do this. And gratitudes, fostering that attitude of gratitude, however cheesy that sounds, and developing that virtue. And it was an almost constant verbal outpouring of gratitudes. Like, I knew I needed to change my heart in a significant way towards myself. My husband had made the comments to me in the past that I really needed to stop talking so poorly about myself. And so I was finding gratitudes like about me, like what do I love about me? Like what is so great about Sam? And oh my gosh, that was a really hard exercise.
Yeah.
Like I could list them off about my husband, but figuring out what was good and great and beautiful and pleasant about me was a challenge. And then the self-care, I was like, working, 3 kids and pregnant. And husband's crazy schedule. My husband's crazy schedule. He was on mandatory callbacks. So I was like, okay, my self-care can't be frivolous things, but I see the need and importance for it. So I started doing daily foot soaks at night. I would do simple things like I'd have this whole evening routine of massaging tallow balm into my face and doing gua sha. I would wake up in the morning and do my morning prayer and Bible reading and have my adrenal cocktail. And it's like, I started viewing self-care as whatever makes me smile and whatever lifts my soul.
Nice.
And now I tell women that all the time. They're like, I don't have time for self-care. I'm like, well, what makes you smile? Tell me. Is it like finding a cute pair of earrings and putting them on? Is it blush and lip gloss? Putting on a dress? Making sure you have your morning latte if that's your gig? For me, it was my adrenal cocktail, which was just like lemon water and coconut water. And so I started refocusing what it means for me to take care of me. And now, because I did that shift, I'm like, everything's self-care. I'm like, I'm going to take a break from lunch. I'm going to go for a walk. If you were to walk upstairs, because I'm in my office building right now. If you were to walk upstairs and see my desk, I've got like plants everywhere. I'm like, this is my happy space while I'm here. I'm going to make it whatever makes me smile. I got pictures of my kids. Like, this is it. So those 2 things are what I did immediately. I came home and my husband was completely confused.
Yeah.
Because and my kids were confused too. So they're like, Mom, you never smile after work. My husband was like, did something happen? I'm like, Mom, I'm fine. Laura, oh my gosh, the next day. Because he was off that day and then he was off the next day before going back on shift. And I get home from work and he had made dinner. He never made dinner.
Never made dinner?
Never made dinner.
And all of a sudden he made
dinner.
And
I would make comments. I'm like, can you make dinner? You make dinner for your station all the time. can you do it can you help me out? I'm pregnant and I'm exhausted. Yeah. And he never did. He's like, no, I'm fine. And he made dinner and the kids were outside playing happily and the inside of the house was cleaned up. Like it wasn't clean, like spotless, but no, it wasn't trashed. Like with toys everywhere, stuff. The kids did their helper sweep and it was like, what is happening? And I text my girlfriend. I'm like, who is this woman? I haven't even done anything. So I order your books, which I still haven't finished reading, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
But I continue listening to podcasts, and I made an apology. I forget, what the apology was for. Doesn't even matter. But I was like, just reflecting on things as I'm listening. And it was something huge. There's been a couple of just really big apologies that I've made where I either did not respect him or I did not trust him in big ways, both when we were dating. So I went back a decade and I apologized for something a decade ago. But after that first apology that I made, he just looked at me and he's like, why are you making this apology? And I said, well, I need to make it. And I know we don't have to make excuses to them. It's like, I could have left it. I said, I need to make it, but I also need to do this for me. And I need to make sure I get it out to you. And he just looked at me and he walked out of the room. And then a few minutes later, he came back and he goes, I think I need to start working on me too.
Oh.
And I was like, I'm not even asking you to work on you. I'm just trying to make sure that my side of the street is clean. I like what Coach Dar, like when I die, I want, like her story, it just continuously sticks out in my mind. I want to sit there and say, you know what, it was all left on the table. Yeah. Like I was clean, he was clean, and we just had a beautiful, happy, thriving marriage.
No regrets.
No regrets. Apologies are so much easier. Now when I'm like, no, if you have an apology to make, go make it now. This is like, just go make it. So I went home and every time I would have this realization of reflection. I've got a whole journal of them, Laura, of this, something I need to make an apology for. I would go home and he's like, okay, what's up? And I'm like, I need to apologize to you. And he goes, okay. Now he's more used to it. 6 months into this. And he's like, okay. I said, I apologize for this. And he goes, well, you don't need to. And I said, that's okay. I did. And I'm just like, smile. I said, thank you for listening to me. And I left the room. I'm done. Thank you for able to make apologies to other people, outside, at work. Apologies at work. If an apology is warranted, I'm able to actually discern what requires an apology now. It's just that.
Let's talk about that a little bit. I like that because so it sounds like you weren't doing a whole lot of apologizing before. Is that fair to say? This was a new practice?
But it wasn't. I would hold resentment still.
Okay.
So I wasn't letting it. Yeah, I wasn't letting it go. I would hold the resentment and be like, I apologize for this, but I'm still angry and I'm still going to hold a grudge and be pissy about it.
Okay.
Really mature, right? Oh my goodness.
We all do it. We all do it. Yeah.
Do it. That's the beautiful thing about the podcast and the coaching program. Oh, I'm not alone. Thank you, Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it would be the I'm sorry or I'm sorry, but, and I realized in no healthy relationship is the but needed.
Hmm. So you gave the axe to the butt.
Gave the axe to the butt, which is
Okay.
funny you mentioned that. We'll get into that later. But
Okay.
yeah. So, oh gosh, how else did I know? Like, and again, this is like, so I think I'm up to 3 skills that I'm doing. And at
Yeah,
this
we got
point,
self-care and gratitude and apologies. Yep.
I signed up for your coaching program because I was like, I'm pregnant. And I created the vision of my future self for postpartum, because my postpartums have always been very challenging. And I wanted this one to be very different. So my vision was created around having a peaceful postpartum where all of us are learning how to be a family of 6 together. And I get to be home and actually resting and healing and taking care of myself and the newborn. And we have plenty of support and community willing to come in and help where needed. And so kind of my gift to myself, like my first big like self-care purchase, my self-care splurge was you. Signing up for your program was like, you know what, we're going to do this. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to go all in and let's get this dialed in. And now I'm, a couple weeks out from giving birth and we're actually all comfortable with rolling, like everyone's comfortable with moving into this new phase for our family. Wow. Because we do have like the joy and the peace, and my kids sing it. Like my kids sing and dance. They never sang and dance in our house ever. And they just like run around and play and sing and dance. It's kind of hysterical. There's a lot of laughter. There's so much laughter again. There's joking. There's increased emotional intimacy with my husband. I would do my studies, what I called my studies, and go into the bedroom because normally he would never whatever, you're going there, I'm not going to be around you because you're in a bad attitude or whatever. And I would go in the bedroom alone to try and like listen to a coaching call or do some reading. This is why I'm not far in your book. And he would come in and sit with me.
Oh.
And to this day, he still does not know. He calls your book the Obedient Wife book because he opened the package that it came in. He's like, well, you're going to learn how to be an obedient wife? I'm like, that's what you think. Sure.
Oh my goodness. I think that is what some people think we're doing around here. It's kind of hilarious, right?
It's really, I've heard that one, and I've heard that we are from someone else that we're manipulating our husbands. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if anything, I'm manipulating myself. Right now. Let's be real.
Right. Yeah.
My husband is just responding to me changing myself. That's it. My kids are responding to me changing myself after doing the self-care. Like I looked in the mirror, Laura, and I was glowing.
Wow.
After like 3 weeks, it was a physical outward appearance change.
Wow.
Of amazing. Practicing these couple of skills.
You must have felt so good.
I was like, I'm hot again.
Hot mama.
My husband couldn't keep his hands off of me. Like, it was like, here's a popsicle, kids. Go outside and play. That was
I love it. So you became an irresistible magnet to your husband.
Yeah.
With these, like, in just a few weeks.
Yeah.
Sounds like.
Yeah.
And your kids started singing and dancing again. Well, not again.
But they just started playing differently.
Wow.
And interacting differently. And my 3-year-old would walk out of the room as I'm getting ready for work, and he'd look at me because I actually started like dressing for work and doing my makeup and, doing silly, like not even doing my makeup that much, blush and lip gloss and mascara. Ooh.
Yeah. Yeah.
But throwing a dress on, he looks at me in the doorway of the bathroom and goes, "Wow, Mom, you look so beautiful."
Oh.
And I'm like, of course, it's like this little mulleted boy. And he's just like, and I'm like, oh, just give me a hug. I'm going to cry for a few
Right?
minutes.
Makes you cry. So sweet. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So your whole family it sounds really wonderful now. And and you gave birth kind of according to your vision, it sounds like, with the support and the resting and all that joy
Yeah.
that you wanted to have around it.
Yeah. So now we're just kind of like waiting for the baby to make their
Oh,
arrival.
oh, you're still
So
pregnant. Sorry. Okay,
I'm
still
still very
pregnant.
pregnant. I'm
I
very pregnant
couldn't see
right
that
now.
part of you. So yeah, I was assuming we already had that kid. Okay, but so you have this
But
vision. All right,
yeah.
and what is your marriage like now? Like, what's your relationship with your husband like?
Um, a lot of emotional intimacy, a lot of which has spilled over into spiritual intimacy. He returned to being the spiritual head of our family. There's physical intimacy, which is fabulous. Just
Love
like,
that.
oh my gosh, you're onto something, Laura. Um,
You're using the best aphrodisiac on the planet.
yeah, I'm leaning into it at this point. And he's loving it. So whatever, we're all
Love
happy.
it. Love it.
Lots of vulnerability in that space too. And exercising, like, I'm going to let him drive. I'm not going to control any of this with my husband. I don't want to control it. I want him to rise to the occasion of his God-given masculinity. And he has, like, tenfold, not just in that space, but like with finances. I started telling him, like, you're providing for our family so abundantly. Thank you. And it was like, that changed my focus. So we're doing that focus exercise now. And I look around like, how are we so abundantly blessed by my husband's hard work and his sacrifices? And we started spending less, and our money in our bank account went like way up because he was feeling like he could provide for us abundantly. And we didn't, like, it was just crazy. Like, he's my Superman. Like, I tell him that. I'm like, you are my Superman. He's like, that's so, they call me like Clark Kent's little brother at work sometimes because he's a probie. So, a little bit of hazing here and there. And I'm like, no. You are not Clark Kent's little brother. You're Superman, and you're my Superman. And he just eats it up. Like, he's like, I'm going to be a macho. And then he's just like melting when I call him that.
Yeah. How fun. It's fun to be married to Superman too, right?
Right? I'm like, oh, he looks good too. Okay, cool. Yeah. And then me, like, my focus within our marriage is like, I'm worthy of being cherished, and I'm worthy of being loved. And by practicing that, like, I tell myself that, okay, now I'm going to practice it. And I allow him the opportunity to love and cherish me.
How do you do that?
I say yes a lot.
So you're a good receiver.
I have to work on it. I had to work on it, yes. But and I used my workplace because I was at work more than I was around my husband. So I used my workplace as my testing ground.
Right. Your little laboratory
for
practicing
working practicing the skills. And each week I would pick a different skill to work on.
I love it.
And there was like one week where I was practicing, graciously receiving. And what was given to me that week, Laura, I had a coworker walk up to me and say, I'm gifting you a salt float. And I'm like, you're gifting me a what? And she goes, a salt float. You're going to go float in a tub and it's going to feel really good. And you're going to be relaxed. I started receiving help from work. Do you need help with this? Before, no, I got it. Yes, I would love help. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you for graciously offering to help me with this. And so then I would go home. And when I would see my husband, like in this testing ground, after this testing ground, kind of incubator week, I was able to say yes to him like so easily. It didn't feel weird. There's some things that still felt vulnerable, but that's okay because that means we're growing.
Yeah.
And it was like, I'm falling in love with you all over again. I'm falling in love with me probably for the first time.
Wow.
And it's just like, it was like this cool space to be in.
Yeah. It sounds exciting. What kinds of things were you saying yes to from him?
I was saying yes to him offering to make dinner, him offering to help with taking care of the kids or like organize the kids' childcare when both he and I were working on the same days. I was, he would like kick me out of the house to go like take a walk or something, and I would fight him on it before. And now I was like, yes, thank you. I'll do that. Saying yes to him, saying like, go buy that dress that you want, that, it's a little more expensive, but you're going to wear it and you're going to look lovely in it. Go ahead and buy it.
Aww.
And not fighting him on it. Because I didn't need to control that. Like he's a grown man.
Yeah.
I married a competent man.
You did.
I wouldn't have married him if he wasn't competent.
No, I don't think so.
And so I can let him make decisions and know where his boundaries and what he's okay with us doing with our finances are.
Wow. Who wouldn't fall in love with that, right?
I
This
don't know.
Superman, generous Superman who's providing so well for your family. And so so a lot of things have changed too. So the Cold Wars where there was no talking. Yeah. Do you still struggle with that sometimes?
No. Because if there's something going on now where like I don't necessarily agree, or like, well, he's not parenting the way I should, I ask myself, how do I feel? What do I want? And are the kids safe? And if I can answer all three of those questions, then I just sit in my room and I duct tape, or I, do whatever I'm doing, and I not sit in my room. Well, I'm pregnant. I'm super pregnant. So there is a lot of like laying with my feet up right now.
Absolutely. Right.
But I let him figure it out. And I think, those life lessons are much more fruitful. There's a lot more fruit that comes from those life lessons as opposed to the wife lessons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's no reason to have Cold Wars anymore. There's no
reason. Because I asked the other question I ask myself is like, well, me responding bring greater intimacy? Will it bring us together as a team, as a husband and wife team couple? Or will it bring us apart, and will we have to work on going back together? And there's one situation early on. I was frustrated. I was not happy with how he was parenting.
Sure, of course.
It's gonna happen. Right? Was like, just bag up the kids' toys. He was like, no, I'm gonna handle it. Well, the way he was handling it was it was the right way to handle it. But I remember holding an empty trash bag in my hand that was rolled up and thinking to myself, will me throwing this at my husband bring us intimacy and closer together? Or will it push us apart? And I was like, well, I'm going for the latter. Really not.
So you even asked yourself, and you always get to pick, right? You
I
always
got
get
to pick. I got to accept the consequences of that one.
Right.
And I knew what I did, and I made an apology like an hour later. I was like, I should not have done that. I know I shouldn't have. And I did anyways. So, that was early on. And then I'm at work, and I get a phone call from the front desk, and they say it's like there's a delivery for me. And in my head, I'm like, I didn't order lunch today. Like,
what is it?
I check my mailbox, like there's nothing there. And I go downstairs, and there's this huge bouquet on the front desk of long stem roses. And everyone, all the way up to our top chiefs were like, girl, what are you doing? And I'm like, they're like, what is happening? And I'm like, my husband just loves me.
So cool. And so he's noticed a difference in you. Has he ever said, I mean, he knows about the Obedient Wife program, I guess, but whatever that is. So has he ever
to figure that one out?
Right? Just leave it. Let him have a mystery to chew on, right? Has he ever said something to acknowledge the transformation in you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He said like little comments here and there. He has, I think, really like that mirror, that wife mirror, seeing me work on myself and no longer doing what I was doing, no longer running away from the family, no longer self-harming. He watched me go through also during this last period of time a very intense, like 6 weeks of my body actually releasing the trauma that it was holding on to from the surgery. So he's watched this whole transformation happen. And what he says is, I'm going to start working on myself, or I need to work on my relationship with the kids and how I handle them more peacefully. So a lot of, the self-fulfilling, because I feel like so much of this has been about me. So much of this journey has been about me, Laura, that he's reflecting that. And a lot of these self-fulfilling prophecies that I have said for myself, he is saying for himself now too.
Really? Like what?
Yeah. Well, I am a peaceful, present mother. We have this thing where I say in our house, like, we are, insert virtue here, or we do X, Y, and Z in the morning. And it's just like instilling that in my own children. And now they wake up and they're like, all right, let's do, like, we are yada yada. We make our beds, we brush our teeth, we help in the kitchen, we make breakfast, and then we go out and play, or we say morning prayers, or whatever it is. Fill in the blank. We get in the car, and they've got like, what are our little self-fulfilling prophecies for how we get in the car in a peaceful and organized manner.
Wow.
And he started saying that. Like, you've never said any of it. And my kids do it peacefully for me. And he's like, oh, maybe this actually works. I can do it for.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love it. That is so cool. You sound like an empowered mother too. Empowered wife and empowered mother.
I didn't think the empowered mother part would be possible until it was another empowered wife and empowered mother in your coaching program who shared so vulnerably. And I was just like floored by her dignity and the respect that she had for her children as their own. I mean, this is her story. Hopefully she comes on. If she hears this, please come on the podcast, because more people need to hear your story too. But I was so impressed. Like, I want that dignity. My children, yes, they are their own people. And I want to see them as that. Like, they're just little people, little small people that are trying to figure out the world, just like I'm trying to figure out the world and struggling my way through it. So,
You want intimacy with them too.
I want intimacy with them too.
Wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, Sam.
Yeah. Everywhere I go, I'm like, well, and now I share you with everyone. And now my husband, I mean, before this started, he was like, you're not going to be able to be a stay-at-home mom. And now he's like, I need you to continue working. And I was in tears, like, I can't freaking do this with 4 kids. And now he's like, no, you're going to be staying home. And you know what? We're going to do all this stuff to get you healed up postpartum. And I swear he dug into my self-care list and like my list of desires that I have like in my notebook that I carry with me at all times. Because it was even down to, I've got one desire on there that was like more frivolous for me, where I want to find the perfect pair of jeans and I want to have a butt that looks good in them again. And he was like, and we're going to get you like, you know, I know you want to be looking good again and you want to be working out and all this stuff. And we're just going to get you there. I'm like, can I have those jeans too?
Cute.
So
he's pretty tuned into you, it sounds like.
He's totally like, whether or not he acknowledges it, he's totally dialed in.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, what's your best tip to somebody who is where you were, who just wants to run away, where the fighting is overwhelming and the responsibility is overwhelming, and self-harm is like a temptation or something she's doing, but she really wants what you have, where there's this sense of lightness and fun at her house and a vision for peace that she's experiencing.
Yeah.
And she's getting a dozen long stem roses from her husband at work, and having great physical intimacy. Where should she start? What should she do first? What's your best tip?
I feel like it's the same thing. There's a reason it's number 1 in your book. Self-care. In self-care, you will learn to love yourself. You will learn that you are worthy of being loved and of being cherished and of cherishing yourself. And all of those things are beautiful and good. And it doesn't have to be extravagant. It just has to make you smile. And that smile is going to take you so far.
Sure took you a long way, for sure.
Really
I love
did. It really did.
And what do you think you would say to Sam if you could go back in time and talk to her?
Exactly what's on my sticky note.
Say it again.
I'm worthy of being loved. I'm worthy of forgiveness. And let's go do it.
Beautiful. Well, very inspiring, Sam. Very moving. It made me cry.
Oh, and sorry. You still look beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Don't be sorry, because I think this is worthwhile. It's not needless emotional turmoil. I'm just very moved.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm sure everyone listening is feeling inspired as well. So thank you so much for helping to end world divorce, and congratulations on fixing your family, fixing yourself.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Laura. It was an absolute pleasure to come on and talk with you today and be able to share this. And if one person is impacted, that's worth it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
If you're wondering how to get started with fixing your relationship and making it shiny again, then you need a roadmap. Get 6 simple steps to follow that will set your relationship up for success. Discover 3 common mistakes that wives make trying to fix their relationship that just make things worse when you download my free Adored Wife Roadmap. You can do that at getcherished.com. Go to getcherished.com now to get your roadmap in minutes.
It's the worst relationship advice. The worst relationship advice. Yeah, it's the worst relationship advice. The worst relationship advice of the week.
And now it's time for the Worst Relationship Advice of the Week award. And the advice that I'm bristling about this week is from a student of over 20 years. It's none other than Master Coach Kathy Murray, who submitted this rotten advice. Kathy is one of the best relationship coaches in the world and has helped thousands of women make their marriages last and thrive. So she knows bad advice when she sees it. Here is my not so anonymous shout out to you, Kathy. I'm so grateful for your many contributions to this podcast and to the Laura Doyle campus and the mission to end world divorce and to my life. Thank you. The article she sent me is called How to Get Your Husband's Attention If You're Tired of Begging for It, which I would have been so eager to read in the bad old days so I could finally get my husband to pay attention to me. But now that I get oodles of attention from my husband and I know why I do, it's pretty obvious that this article is just a big steaming pile of cheese whiz. The painful kind of cheese whiz that used to rob me of hope because I was following stupid, worthless tips that made things worse. Like in the movie Mean Girls, where Katie gives Regina a fattening candy bar, but tells her they're diet bars so Regina will gain weight. And she does. Same kind of thing here. So, are you ready for some empty calories? Here's one of the many appalling sentences from this article. Quote, be sure to observe his behaviors on a daily basis. Where is he putting his attention when he isn't offering it to you? Yes, that's what the article says, because if there's one thing that's attractive, it's obsessing about what he's doing wrong and seeing everything else as competition for his attention and affection. You could even start to get suspicious about his motives. That will draw him to you like a magnet to steel. Not. No. Okay. It reminds me of that line from the movie Broadcast News where Albert Brooks says, wouldn't this be a great world if insecurity and desperation made us more attractive? But they don't. And that's pretty much what this article is telling you to do, is develop insecurity and desperation. That's certainly not what you did when you fell in love and had all those good times together. Back then, you weren't seeing him talking on the phone to his mom or playing fantasy football as competition for his time. You were too busy having fun, feeling good yourself. And in my experience, if your man is distant, that may have gone missing. Your sense of fun, your easy laugh, and that 1,000 megawatt smile of yours, that may have more to do with why your husband doesn't seem as drawn to you as he once did. I mean, you used to smile at him and be happy to see him. And now, well, if you're scowling or crying or crossing your arms at him to get him to change, well, that's just not how attraction works. But finding you're happy again, that's a powerfully appealing force. And the thing is, that's an inside job. You're not going to find it by observing him, what he's doing. He can't make you happy if you're not already primed for it. And focusing on what he's not doing is not the road to inner happiness, in my experience. Focusing on what he's doing is how you get a case of the he's, where you say, he did this, he said that, he went there. He has this. He. Focusing on yourself and what will fill you up is a much more effective solution to the distance that you're feeling. Giggling with your girlfriends or going to the beach or reading a book or sleeping in, One of those or three of those might bring that smile to your face. And when he sees you're happy, that relieves some tension because that's one of the most important things to him, that you're happy. Even if that doesn't seem true right now, you might be surprised how he responds when he sees you happy. For those reasons, the advice that to get your husband's attention without begging, you should, quote, be sure to observe his behaviors on a daily basis is the very, very worst relationship advice I have heard all week. Listen and subscribe to the Empowered Wife podcast. Next week, I'm answering the question, what is cheating in a relationship? In the meantime, I hope you're having lots of fun. Today's fun fact is that when I announced from one end of the house that I'd lost a pound, John yelled back from the other end, I hope you find it so helpful.